Are Trump and Republicans in Congress attempting to strip the federal courts of their ability to enforce their orders by holding members of the administration in contempt for violating their orders? That's what I want to talk about here. But I want to set this conversation up so that you understand where I'm coming from here. Yesterday, I posted a video about this idea that the big, beautiful bill that is currently pending in Congress, it's passed the House, now it's pending in the Senate, that bill contains a provision that would allow the president to cancel future elections. I've heard that said many times. I don't know where that rumor came from, but, I like to read the comments section of my, read comments to my videos, because I can get an idea of things, of what's on people's minds, questions that they have, issues that are on their mind. And I've seen that one over and over again, that Trump is going to be able to cancel future elections because of provision in this bill. So I did a video about that. Please watch it if you haven't done so already. I will link that video in the description below. Anyway, so I tried to find out where this came from. Is such a provision in the bill? I mean, it sounds absolutely absurd. And for reasons I discussed in that video, it wouldn't go anywhere, even if that provision were in the bill, because it is so grossly unconstitutional. Anyway, I'm not going to go through everything I said. Watch that video. But the point is, I found no such evidence of a provision, of that provision in the bill. And by the way, I didn't mention this in that video, but have you noticed, if you've heard this rumor, if you've heard people on social media and YouTube and whatnot making this claim that provision to cancel elections is in the bill, have you noticed that no one ever cites a section of the bill? Nobody ever quotes specific language that's in the bill. They just say that it's in the bill, but offer no proof whatsoever. On top of that, there are a lot of people who go through these things. There are organizations that exist to go through bills like this. All right. And here's a perfect example. Mark Elias, he's a lawyer who litigates. He's got a group who litigates all these election related issues. He's defeated Trump on his the phony election, that the election was rigged, all that crap. And he's constantly litigating these election-related issues. And he has an entire group dedicated to that. If there were a provision in this bill giving the president the authority to cancel elections, don't you think Mark Elias's group would be all over this? But they've said nothing about this because it's not there. Anyway, I explained some of that in the video. And in response, I got lots of comments, which is why I'm doing this video, where people said, okay, maybe that's not in there, but here's what I think people are talking about. They're talking about a provision in the bill that would strip the federal courts of the power to enforce their orders by holding members of the administration in contempt. That's what they're talking about when they're talking about Trump having the authority to cancel future elections. What the hell? Who's this is pulling in behind me? Must be them. It's post office. Anyway, those two things, oops, hit the wrong friggin' button there on my phone. Those two things have nothing to do with each other. I mean, I don't see how you draw that connection, where if you strip the federal courts of their ability to enforce their orders by holding members of the administration in contempt, how that then means that the president can cancel future elections. I'm sorry, but that's a non sequitur. Anyway, so I want to deal with that. The provision which would strip the courts of their ability to hold people in contempt. First, understand that that Congress has a great deal of authority to regulate the courts. They, rules of criminal procedure and rules of evidence and rules of civil procedure and fines and jurisdictional issues and all these things that go to operation of the courts and how cases are heard and tried and filed and all this stuff, Congress can set all of that. Congress can create courts and dissolve courts. In fact, the only court that's in the Constitution, created by the Constitution, is the Supreme Court. Every other federal court is a creation of Congress, passed by statute. And so Congress, if they wanted to, could dissolve the entire federal court system except for the Supreme Court. So the Congress has a lot of authority over the courts. So they potentially could pass a provision like this, stripping the courts of their ability to enforce their orders through contempt. Now, it's debatable whether the courts, because the courts still have the power of judicial review, so that would be litigated, and it's debatable whether the courts would uphold that provision. I think there's a very good chance that they would not. Courts really, don't like it when their power is curtailed by Congress, and they may determine that the ability to enforce their orders through contempt is an inherent Article 3 power given to the courts by the Constitution. And if that's the case, then that provision of this big, beautiful bill would be null and void. And so that whole provision could be thrown out anyway. But even assuming that it wasn't, assume that it's in the bill, it passes, the president signs it, it's law, and the courts even uphold it. And they are no longer allowed to enforce their orders by contempt. So what? My question to you is, so what? How do you think, does that change the situation in any way? Do you see the federal courts holding people in contempt? Do you see the federal courts enforcing their own orders? What am I missing here? No, that doesn't freaking happen anyway. I mean, what are we talking about when we're talking about the courts enforcing their own orders? Okay, so they make an order. It's supposed to be followed. Okay, now it's not being followed. What then can they do? Well, they can hold people in civil contempt or criminal contempt. So they can fine them, which they don't even do. They don't even do that. Or they could potentially hold them in civil contempt and put them in jail. Do you see that happening? Is that happening anywhere where people are violating orders of the court, this administration violating orders of the court? Do you see anyone being held in contempt? Do you see anyone being fined after being held in contempt? Do you see anybody being put in jail after being held in contempt? And by the way, even if they did, who's going to enforce those orders? Who's going to collect that fine? Okay, so they issue an order. Someone in the Trump administration violates it. They hold them in contempt and they order them to pay a fine. What happens when they don't pay a fine? What are they going to do then? Oh, well, then maybe they'll hold them in criminal contempt. Okay, who's going to arrest them and put them in jail? Where are they going to be held? Okay, you know how that happens? The U.S. Marshals are the ones who would be ordered to arrest people on a criminal contempt order from a judge. Who does the U.S. Marshal Service work for? Donald freaking Trump. The Marshal Service is in the executive branch. So even if the court held a member of the administration in criminal contempt and ordered them arrested and jailed, you think that order is going to be followed? No, of course not. So the point is, look, I'm not defending that provision being in the bill. It's awful. One, as I said, I think there's a very good chance that gets thrown out anyway, because Congress cannot cannot eliminate an inherent Article 3 power of the court. And the court may very well say, no, the ability to hold people in contempt to enforce our orders is an inherent Article 3 power of the judiciary, and you can't limit that power by statute. So I think that's the likely outcome of that anyway. But even if it weren't, so what? It doesn't actually change anything that's happening right now, because people aren't being held in contempt. And even if they were, nothing would happen anyway. You got to understand this. You can't escape this simple fact. The only body that can hold Donald Trump or anyone in his administration accountable to the law is Congress. That's it. The courts have the power to rule on cases brought before them. They can issue contempt citations. They can hold people in civil and criminal contempt. But they can't even enforce those orders. And so they won't be enforced. So my point is that provision doesn't change anything. It doesn't change a damn thing, because no one's being held in contempt now, and it never would be enforced anyway. The only body that can do anything about this criminal regime that violates court orders and violates the Constitution and violates the law, the only body in our system that can truly hold these people accountable is Congress. And the only real way that they can do that is through impeachment and removal. That's it. That's the remedy that the founders, the framers of the Constitution built into the Constitution to deal with this situation. Impeachment and removal. That is the constitutional remedy. And that is the sole power of Congress. And if Congress refuses to hold these people accountable, then there is no one else in the system with the authority to hold these people accountable. Okay? So that, I'm sorry, is the fact. That is the constitutional and legal fact that people have to freaking deal with. The only way to deal with this is with impeachment and removal. Oh yeah, Romano, but that's never going to happen. Okay. I agree with you. It's not going to happen right now. Maybe things could be different 18 months from now, after the midterms. I'm not saying they will be different to the point that we can impeach and remove any of these people. But maybe it will be. But that's it. That is our system. And you're not going to come up with some magical solution to this problem. I hear it all the time. I'm sorry if I'm a little frustrated, because I get the same shit said to me over and over and over again. And one of the things I get said over and over to me across all my platforms, not just comments here on YouTube, is, why isn't anyone doing anything to stop him? The Constitution is meaningless. Our laws don't mean anything. And I even had somebody who, from another country, said, your laws are shit. Your laws are worthless. Well, you know what? I don't know where that person was from, but their laws are just as worthless and toothless as ours, because there is no constitution, there is no law that can be written by man that can enforce itself. Any constitution, any law, any rule requires for its enforcement people to enforce that constitution, those laws, those rules. And if the people in positions of power to enforce the law refuse to do it, the law cannot enforce itself. So it's not a question of the Constitution is worthless, the Constitution has failed, our laws have... No. This is a failure of the people, of our political process. The people in Congress who refuse to do their friggin' jobs, refuse to uphold the Constitution, refuse to hold these criminals in the Trump regime responsible and accountable under the law. The people in those positions refusing to do their duties were elected to Congress by the American people. All right? They didn't put themselves there. The people put them there. The people put us in this friggin' position. The people elected a criminal. And yes, not all of us, not you most likely watching this. I don't need endless comments every time I say the American people elected Donald Trump. Well, I didn't elect Donald Trump. No shit, I didn't vote for him either. But me saying the American people elected Donald Trump, people always take issue with that. Well, was it the French people that elected Donald Trump? Was it the friggin' Mexicans? Did Mexico elect Donald Trump? No, the American people elected Donald Trump. And yeah, he didn't even get a majority of the vote. But that's our system. And elections are how we, the American people, make political decisions. And so, of course, do I have to say, not every time I say the American people voted for Donald Trump, do I have to add the caveat, well, not everybody voted for Donald Trump? No shit, there's never been a unanimous election. So unless there's a unanimous election where every single person who voted the exact same way, unless that's the case, I have to insert the caveat, well, not everybody voted that way. It's ridiculous. And sorry to be yelling at you. Most of you people understand this. Some of this shit is just irritating. Anyway, the point is, there is no magic solution, okay? There is no solution out there buried in some law or some provision of the Constitution that no one has yet discovered. And that if we're really creative, we can use it to force Donald Trump out of office or to hold him accountable. No, there is no such magical solution hidden somewhere. The solution, which was designed exactly for situations like this, is right there, plain as day in the Constitution. Impeachment and removal. It's not easy. It's not supposed to be easy. You're not supposed to easily be able to undo elections by removing people from office. It's supposed to be difficult. It's not supposed to be this freaking difficult, but at the time, they never thought, and maybe obviously this was an error in their, thinking about this, but they did not anticipate a situation where Congress would be controlled by a cult in service of the president. The reason they did separation of powers the way they did was they expected each branch of government to act independently of the others, to jealously guard their own authority. But that whole system has broken down, especially with this Congress, because they don't view themselves as an independent branch of government. They view themselves as servants of Donald Trump. And the American people voted for that. The American people had a choice. They did not have to elect Donald Trump's cult to Congress. They did not have to put control of an entire branch of government in the hands of Donald Trump's personality cult. But they did. This is a democracy. It's a democratic republic. It's a constitutional republic. All republics are democracies. Don't you hate when Trump cultists say, we're not a democracy, we're a republic? Yeah, a republic is a form of democracy. What do you think the voting is about, you morons? Anyway, we are a democracy. We get what we vote for. This is what the American people voted for. They voted for a criminal, wannabe dictator who made no secret of that. He said he was going to be a dictator. The American people voted for him. He's a convicted felon. The American people voted for him. And not only that, they made sure, now I know they don't think in these terms, but this is what they did. They made sure that that criminal could never be held accountable politically and legally, because they saved his ass from prison. It wasn't the courts that saved him. It wasn't the Supreme Court. As bad as their immunity decision was, it wasn't they who saved Donald Trump from prison. It was the American people who reelected him. He'd be on trial as we speak, most likely, or in the very near future, if he hadn't been reelected by the American people. The American people let him get away with his crimes. And the American people elected his cult to control Congress, guaranteeing that he could not be impeached and removed from office for the crimes he commits in this term. So that's where we are. There's no magic solution. And going back to my original point, oh no! They might strip the courts of their ability to hold members of the administration in contempt. So freaking what? They weren't going to be held in contempt anyway. Like I said, you see anybody being held in contempt now? The Trump administration is openly defying courts all over the place. They're not being held in contempt. So who gives a shit? If with respect to this president, I mean, it's horrible. This provision should be taken out, and, I'm not in support of it. Don't get me wrong. But I'm saying it doesn't freaking change anything. No one's being held in contempt now. And one of the reasons why they're not being held in contempt is because they know that those contempt orders wouldn't be followed. And it would lay bare the fact that the courts are completely powerless. That their orders, if they are ignored, cannot be enforced by them. And they're worried about how to deal with this because they're worried about their own legitimacy. They're worried about issuing orders and then issuing contempt orders, and they all just get ignored. What's the point of holding someone in contempt, civil contempt or criminal contempt, if those orders are just ignored? It just further proves that the courts are powerless. So this provision, even if it becomes law, and if it's upheld by the courts, which, again, I don't think, it probably wouldn't be. Courts aren't going to allow themselves to have their own authority be limited in that way, but we'll see. Even if it is, it doesn't change anything. And it certainly then doesn't lead to, well, since you can't hold anyone in contempt, then therefore Donald Trump can cancel future elections. I don't want to get into that. Watch that video, please. If you want to understand why it's so ridiculous, this idea that Trump could cancel future elections, it's not just because it's illegal and unconstitutional, which it is, but there's other reasons. So please watch that video, linked in the description below. Anyway, you get my point. And to end, again, I will repeat it. There is no freaking magic solution here. The American people need to rise up. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. The only way this man is going to be impeached and removed from office, as he should be, is if members of Congress fear the American people more than they fear Donald Trump. And right now, that certainly isn't the case. Can we change that whole dynamic? Maybe. That's what we should be focused on. Stop wasting your time trying to come up with some magic hidden solution buried in a friggin' law book or some provision of the Constitution that's written in invisible fucking ink or something that nobody's discovered yet. Those things don't exist. Impeachment and removal. Failing that, we need to do our best to preserve this republic, what remains of it, until this guy is out of office, and then maybe try to rebuild and put, pass the law, amend the Constitution, do something to prevent this kind of thing from happening in the future. Those are our options. Impeach and remove him, or try to survive until he's out of here. That's it. And the sooner that people come to grips with that reality, the better we're all going to be. Because then maybe we can focus our energy on actually achieving goals, actually accomplishing something. Anyway, it is pouring down rain here, and I got a good walk to the house and no umbrella. This sucks. Anyway, thank you for watching. I appreciate you listening to my rant, and I'll talk to you again soon.